Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Our mission here, as always, is to take a huge stack of research, neuroscience studies, productivity papers, you name it, and just distill it all down for you. We want to give you that shortcut to being really, truly well-informed. And today, we're diving into something we're calling the Symphony of Consciousness.
That's a great way to frame it. This deep dive is really all about integration. We're looking at how you can get to this comprehensive state of well-being, not just by focusing on one thing, but by syncing up inputs from 4 different domains.
Right, so we're talking about the brain, the gut, habits, and even work philosophy.
Exactly. We're pulling together insights from mindfulness-based cognitive therapy, the whole gut-brain axis, and even this concept of slow productivity. The whole goal is to give you evidence-based, actionable knowledge that really connects all the dots.
Okay, let's unpack that first piece of the symphony then. The conductor, which I guess would be the mindful brain itself. For a long time, mindfulness was seen as, well, a bit soft, maybe unproven. But the sources we pulled, they show that mindfulness-based interventions, or MBIs, are now proving to be just as effective as things like cognitive behavioral therapy.
And in some cases, slightly superior. We're talking about for managing things like anxiety, depression, and stress.
Which is a huge claim.
It is, but what's fascinating is that it's not just people saying, oh, I feel better. We have solid neurophysiological evidence to back it up. We're not just talking about simple relaxation. We're talking about physically measurable changes happening in the brain from consistent practice.
Okay, that sounds pretty technical. So if mindfulness is actually rewiring the brain, what are the most critical parts involved? If you had to give the one-sentence takeaway on the neuro impact, what would it be?
The key takeaway is this. Mindfulness physically retrains your brain's emergency brake, and at the same time, it upgrades the CEO's office.
I like that analogy.
Yes, specifically, studies consistently show more activity, better connectivity, and even more volume in the prefrontal cortex, the PFC, along with a few other areas. These are the critical hubs for attention, for learning, and for your executive functions.
So the PFC is the CEO that's running the show. What happens to the emergency brake then? The part that keeps us in threat mode all the time.
Well, when it comes to emotional regulation, the change is really twofold. MBIs lead to less activity in the amygdala, that's the brain's threat center, and at the same time, they improve the connection between the amygdala and the prefrontal cortex.
So you're saying the alarm goes off less often, and when it does, the CEO is faster at shutting it down.
That's a perfect way to put it. Your emotional reactions are less intense, and your executive center gets much better, much more efficient at checking that threat response before it spirals.
Before it becomes that endless rumination and worry.
Precisely. The core mechanism is just stopping that negative thought spiral before it really takes hold. Regular practice interrupts that automatic, cognitive and emotional reactivity that so often triggers depression and anxiety. It just gives you a moment of space, a choice.
And this is where it gets really essential for anyone trying to apply this. The sources all stressed consistency. I saw one big analysis that found participants who actually did their homework, which was about 64% of them on average, they showed way bigger improvements.
Right, and that 64% number is critical.
Why that number specifically?
Because it tells you that the minimum effective dose is achievable, but it's not passive. It takes deliberate effort. If you just show up for the weekly session, you're not going to get those neurophysiological benefits we're talking about. You have to put in the time for the brain to start that rewiring process. 64% compliance just proves that the people who commit, even if they miss a day here and there, they're the ones who fundamentally change their outcomes.
Okay, so we've established the brain needs that consistency to literally rewire itself. To move from, like you said, a reactive threat center to a controlled executive suite. But consistency is, it's hard. So how do we take this rewired brain and make it stick to the new rules when we're stressed and life is just coming at us full speed?
And that is the classic challenge. We rely way too much on that brilliant but very easily tired PFC, the CEO. When the CEO is stressed or just worn out, the brain immediately defaults to its old, established, and often pretty unproductive patterns.
The habit loop, that's the brain's autopilot system.
The classic cue, routine, and reward.
Can we walk through a really concrete example, something that everyone can relate to, just to see how that loop works, and more importantly, how to interrupt it?
Absolutely. Let's take the classic afternoon slump at work. The cue is that little dip in energy, right? The moment you shift from focused work to needing a break. The routine, for so many of us, is instinctively grabbing your phone to check social media. We all are. And the reward is that little neurological hit, a tiny shot of dopamine from a notification that gives you a mental break. And that loop gets stronger every single time you do it.
So the trick then seems to be about reducing the activation energy for a new routine, making the first step just ridiculously small.
That is exactly right. If you want a new positive practice to stick, you have to make it so small that it feels impossible to skip. The sources really emphasize this power of the micro. So if you want to be a better learner, for instance, make the routine super short, like 3 to 7 minutes of focused activity. That's what makes repetition sustainable. It's not about duration.
And the payoff for that repetition is a literal physical change in the brain. It's mastery.
It is. It's the physical foundation of any skill. When you repeatedly practice something, your brain insulates those neural pathways with a fatty substance called myelin.
Like the rubber coating on a wire.
Perfect. It's high-grade insulation. The process is called myelination, and it lets the signal travel way faster and with much more precision. That's why a practice skill feels automatic and effortless. It's not just memory, it's high-speed neural architecture.
Okay, so we're building new paths. But what about the old bad ones? I get the science, but for someone listening who feels overwhelmed, swapping doom scrolling for, say, 3 deep breaths, it sounds almost too simple. It doesn't seem like it would work.
And that's because we forget the most important part. You can't just delete a bad habit. You have to replace the routine. But the key, the real hurdle, is making sure the new routine delivers the old reward.
Okay.
If your doom scrolling is really driven by a need for a mental break, your new routine has to give you that break quickly and effectively. So maybe it's 3 deep breaths, and then you immediately check a prioritized to-do list you made earlier. That gives you a similar feeling of control, a mental shift. You have to be a detective about what you're really craving.
And that detective work, it seems to go beyond just our thoughts and into our physical selves. I mean, if we're aiming for this symphony of consciousness, we have to admit that physical health is the foundation. And the 2 most immediate inputs are what we eat and how we rest.
Absolutely. Starting with nutrition, this emerging field of nutritional psychiatry is putting a huge emphasis on the gut-brain axis. And this isn't a metaphor. The bacteria in your gut, your microbiome, are literally synthesizing the neurotransmitters that regulate your mood and emotions. An inflamed gut is actively undermining your mental resilience.
Wait, so the state of our gut bacteria can directly impact how anxious we feel?
Essentially, yes. And inflammation is the bridge. Ultra-processed foods, added sugars, refined carbs, they all create chronic inflammation in the gut. And that inflammation is strongly linked in the research to depression and anxiety. But on the flip side, when you feed the good bacteria, they help reduce that systemic inflammation, which helps stabilize your mood.
Okay, so what are the most direct, actionable things people can do? What are the best nutritional inputs?
Well, fiber, fruits, and vegetables are non-negotiable because of their anti-inflammatory effects. But the most direct, tactical move is probably adding fermented foods. Things like yogurt with active cultures, kimchi, kombucha. They directly restore those beneficial microorganisms. Also, your brain itself needs healthy fats. Omega-3s from fatty fish are critical. They have powerful anti-inflammatory effects that have been shown to directly reduce anxiety symptoms.
It's like you're supplying the building blocks for that healthy brain structure we talked about earlier.
You are. And that brings us to the second pillar, rest.
Right. Optimizing sleep. What did this deep dive tell us about maximizing sleep quality for, mental endurance?
That sleep quality is it's non-negotiable for cognitive function. And the first step is just respecting your circadian rhythm. Consistency in your sleep and wake times is absolutely key.
And what about naps? That midday slump is real for a lot of people.
It's entirely physiological, but the sources give some pretty strict rules for napping. They can't be more than 15 or 20 minutes. And critically, they shouldn't happen more than 12 hours after you last woke up. Any later or longer, and you start messing with the sleep pressure you need for a good night's rest.
And I'm guessing all those environmental cues we talked about with habits, they apply to sleep too.
Yeah.
You have to train your brain to see the bedroom as a place for rest.
100%. You have to be so mindful of your environmental cues. If you're always working or worrying in bed, your brain starts to associate that space with alertness. A core rule of sleep hygiene is, if you can't fall asleep within 15 minutes, you get up. Go do something relaxing somewhere else and only come back when you feel sleepy. You're breaking the worrying in bed routine. And of course, avoid bright light, especially blue light late in the evening. It directly suppresses melatonin.
So the ultimate application for all of this, syncing up the brain, the gut, habits, rest, is really about preventing burnout and performing sustainably, especially at work. This seems to be where positive psychology and this idea of flow productivity come together.
Exactly. The traditional PERMA model, positive emotions, engagement, relationships, meaning, and accomplishments, is a great start. But for a truly holistic view of well-being at work, researchers expanded it to the PERMA+4 framework. The argument is that those first 5 elements are unstable without these 4 other building blocks.
Okay, let's break those down. Why are these 4 additions so critical?
Because they provide the context for everything else. The first is physical health, which is everything we just talked about, nutrition and sleep. You can't have engagement if you're exhausted. The second is mindset. This is your psychological capital. Hope, resilience, optimism. If you don't believe you can succeed, it doesn't matter how well rested you are.
Yeah, the next 2 are more about your environment, right?
They are. The third is physical work environments. This means things like having natural light or the tools you need to focus, like noise-canceling headphones. A chaotic environment kills focus. And the last one is economic security. If you're constantly worried about money, that chronic stress will just wipe out any benefits you get from meaning or accomplishments. These 4 blocks are proven to predict performance and life satisfaction.
And it's this holistic PERMA+4 view that really supports the whole philosophy of slow productivity, which is basically a rebellion against treating busyness as a proxy for effort, right?
It is. It's about recognizing the huge cost of overhead. The philosophy has 3 simple principles. First, do fewer things. Be absolutely ruthless in protecting your cognitive energy.
That sounds completely counterintuitive to the modern do more with less mantra.
And that's the disconnect. The second principle, work at a natural pace, tackles that. It suggests you should have seasons in your workflow. Periods of intense focus, but also periods of recovery instead of just sprinting 365 days a year.
And the third principle, obsess over quality, that really connects back to the idea of focus and myelination we talked about.
Exactly. The core idea is that adding more tasks just exponentially increases the overhead, the work about work, the emails, the meetings about meetings. By focusing on doing fewer things well, you get better results, you strengthen that feeling of accomplishment, and you dramatically reduce the exhaustion that leads to burnout. It's about quality of output, not quantity of effort.
So we've really covered the whole spectrum in this deep dive. We've gone from the physical architecture of our neurons to the design of our workday. It really confirms that the benefits of this multimodal approach, this symphony of consciousness, are incredibly robust.
The results are clear. Consistency in mindful practice, supported by the right nutrition, sleep, and a sustainable work rhythm, it all adds up. It significantly reduces distress, enhances cognitive function, and improves long-term well-being. The power is in seeing yourself not as just a mind, but as a whole unified system.
So if we know that you can't just delete a bad habit, you have to replace it, and that these little micro routines are the most powerful way to create change, maybe this is the thought to leave you with.
What is the single most destructive habit you've identified in your own life? The one that really undermines your physical health or your engagement? And what is the smallest possible 3-minute micro routine pulled from everything we've talked about today that you could swap in, starting right now, to steal the reward that destructive habit is currently giving you?